Hello everyone and welcome to episode 52 of the Card Combo Show and a new recording area. Renovations on the house, gonna take a while, I'll be here for a bit. Where we look at the weird and wonderful card combinations in the Final Fantasy TCG. This week we are going to be looking at cards that have a board-wide effect, so they can be either passive abilities or effects that simply affect more than one character, so attacks all forwards and stuff like that. And the cards we're going to be looking at this week are Sterne Leonis from Opus 14, Illua from Opus 5, Zoo from Opus 7, Vanille from Opus 7, and finally Shiva, Lady of the Frost from Opus 14. Okay, so let's get this ball rolling with Shiva, Lady of the Frost. She is a 5 CP 9k ice forward with the text, "You cannot play Shiva, Lady of the Frost or card name Isael while already in control of either character." Minor spoilers there. Oh, sorry. When Shiva, Lady of the Frost enters the field, choose one character your opponent controls. Dull it. Freeze all the forwards your opponent controls. Put 3 backups into the break zone. Remove Shiva, Lady of the Frost from the game, then play Shiva, Lady of the Frost onto the field. So she has her own little flicker effect. What's decent is the fact that you probably won't be able to use her ability more than once in a turn, because you have to break 3 backups, and the chance of you breaking 3 backups and then getting another backup down and then breaking all your backups is pretty unlikely. But if it wins you the game, then maybe you'll do it anyway. But and obviously she can dull a character, so it can be a backup as well, or a monster, and then you get to freeze all of your opponent's forwards, which is pretty good, and especially given the fact that you can re-enter her on your opponent's turn as well, so there's lots for your opponent to consider with this forward on the field. So first we've got Garland. So when a backup is put from the field into the break zone, draw 1 card. So using Shiva, you get to put 3 of your own backups into the break zone, you get to draw 3 cards. So whilst obviously it may be a bit aggressive against you to break 3 of your own backups, depending on what the backups are, you may get something from it, but Garland will just get you 3 cards to hand anyway, which is super cool. Also, Ice and Fire are a really good pairing, so this just works really nicely. Then we've got Ravana, Saviour of the Nuff. So another primal. So when a character is put from the field into the break zone, activate Ravana, Saviour of the Nuff. And obviously he can attack 4 times in the same turn. So it means that you could attack with Ravana, or play Shiva, sorry, and dull a blocking forward out of the way, attack Ravana, he obviously goes dull. You then use Shiva's ability to break 3 backups, which would then reactivate Ravana, and then obviously Shiva would re-enter again, and you could dull another forward out of the way, and Ravana can attack a second time. Goomba. When Goomba is put from the field into the break zone, you may search for one card named Goomba and play it onto the field dull. So it means that you could actually use all your Shiva's ability twice if you really wanted to, because you can break 3 backups, including Goomba. Goomba then comes back onto the field and break your 3 remaining backups. Again, it's pretty aggressive, but if it wins you the game, why not? Une. So you may cast a summon, obviously flicker Shiva, Lady of the Frost back onto the field. So this is good because obviously you don't have to constantly destroy your own backups. But why I like this is because obviously Shiva has the ability to freeze all your opponent's forwards. So if you are able, dull a character and freeze all your opponent's forwards. But if you are able to get all of your opponent's forwards frozen, then that means obviously on their turn those forwards will simply become dull, or rather won't activate that turn. And then when it comes to your turn, provided you can cast a summon, you can flicker Shiva and just keep those forwards locked down. And even if your opponent does play a forward on their turn that's active, Shiva re-enters, dulls it, and then it becomes frozen because of her static effect. So Une and Shiva are a great way to just make sure that your opponent's forwards are just locked down and don't go anywhere. Ultimisia. So all the forwards other than Ultimisia enter the field dull. Now obviously this does also refer to your own forwards as well, so you need to be careful of that. But still, if you are able to, combo this with Une, it means that you can keep your opponent's forwards constantly locked down, just constantly frozen, and whilst it'll be super slow for you to eventually start activating your forwards and then attacking with them, if it wins you the game. Illua. So, very infamous card, very, very, very powerful card. 3 CP, 6k lightning forward with haste during each turn. When Illua is chosen by your opponent summons or ability, for the first time that turn, cancel its effect, and the Sheol S ability, activate all the forwards you control. They gain haste until the end of the turn. All the forwards your opponent controls lose 2,000 power until the end of the turn. So, despite the fact she has an incredible defense ability on her, she also has an incredible S ability, arguably one of the best in the game. Minus 2k to all your opponent's forwards, you get to reactivate all your forwards and give them haste for just an S. That's nuts! Anyway, Cloud. Opus 14 Cloud. I love this card. I'm so making a deck with this Cloud. But if your opponent controls any forwards, Cloud gains plus 2000 power. So if you're using Illua's S ability, chances are you want to break something. But when Cloud attacks, choose one forward. It gains, if possible, this forward must block until the end of the turn. So you use Illua's S to give Cloud haste. He will be plus 2k because your opponent has a forward. You attack with Cloud. The opponent's forward must block. Well, you'd have to choose it with Cloud's ability, but you know, that's part of the plan. You choose the forward, it has to block, and it's also minus 2k power. So even if your opponent has an 11k forward, Cloud's on the field, he gains plus 2k, Illua S, minus 2k to your opponent's forward, you're gravy. Right, Bahamut. So this requires you to have a lot of fire summons in your break zone, but, you know, that's not too hard to do, really. There's a lot of good fire summons. So obviously 3 fire summons, Bahamut gains plus 2000 power, but if you have 7 fire summons in your break zone, when Bahamut attacks, deal 5k damage to all the opponents, or to all the forwards your opponent controls. So a great board wipe effect, but you know, if you've got Bahamut onto the field, you've got the 7 in the break zone, you can then use Illua's S ability, minus 2k to your opponent's field, Bahamut gains haste, attacks, deals 5k to the board, so that's a total of a 7k power swing effectively, which is enough to deal quite a substantial board wipe. But then you could also use his Impulse S as well, which is just an S and a fire to deal 4k to all the forwards your opponent controls as well. Now obviously that is the S for Illua, which is 2 CP. There is the S for Impulse plus the fire, so that's a further 3 CP, so a total of 5. Then there's a 3 CP you paid for Bahamut onto the field as well. So that's 8 CP. But 8 CP for a forward, a fire forward that has haste, deals 9k to the field, you minus 2k to your opponent's board, and is also a 9k forward. That's just really pretty good, and to be honest, that's on par with the likes of Filia and Susano, so I think that's still decent. Puppet Master. So dull 2 active forwards, choose one forward, dull it. You can only use ability once per turn. Obviously it's only once per turn per Puppet Master, so if you've got a couple of them, you can use it twice. So let's say you have, I don't know, Puppet Master, something else, and Illua. You can dull Puppet Master and Illua to dull a forward. You can then use Illua's S ability to reactivate your forwards. Then you can use another Puppet Master and Illua again to dull another forward. You could then use another Illua S if you wanted. But obviously you don't have to do it that way. It could be, I mean, there's a lot of good ways you can use this card, or Master, to be honest, but being able to use Illua to then reactivate, you can even use it on your opponent's turn. Your opponent's got a forward that you don't want them to attack with, you've got dull Puppet Master and Illua, you can Illua S to reactivate those forwards, to then dull Puppet Master and Illua, to then also dull out a forward on your opponent's turn as well. So, you know, it's pretty decent. Bismarck, Lord of the Mists. So you can dull 1 active wind forward, choose one forward, deal it 2000 damage. So let's say you've got Illua, Bismarck, and another wind forward. Let's go, Varn. You can dull Bismarck and dull Varn. That's 4k dealt to a forward. You can then use Illua's S to reactivate those forwards, and then you can dull them again to deal a further 4k to that forward. Or, you know, you could deal it to other forwards if you really want to. But you can also, I mean, Illua's S is also minus 2k to your opponent's board as well, so that means they'll be a lot easier to kill using Bismarck's effect. Right, here's where we go down the rabbit hole. So you've got Regis, Noctis, and Kefka. So let's say on your field you have Illua, Regis, Noctis as a backup, and another forward. You put Illua, Regis, and that other forward into the break zone to play Kefka onto the field. Kefka then gets to break forward. You can then use Noctis to play Regis back onto the field from your break zone. Regis will then play the other 2 forwards that were put into the break zone with Kefka, which is Illua and something else, and then when they re-enter the field, you can then use Illua's S ability. So you've just, I mean, you've got the entry ability of Regis, the entry ability of Illua, well, not entry ability, but the standard effect of Illua, and then whatever the entry ability of the other forward as well is, and that could be something pretty powerful as well. And they all gain haste, and all your opponent's forwards lose 2000 power. That's just insanely strong. For what is just an S for Illua and breaking Noctis, wow, that's so powerful. Ravana, Saver of the Nuff. So, yep, again, obviously Illua can reactivate Ravana to then him swing again. Ravana's just a generally good card. His ability, or the fact that he, whenever he's dealt damage, is minus 5k, is so strong. And, you know, Illua minusing 2k to your opponent's field as well means that that kind of leans into that even more so, and Ravana just becomes very hard to kill. Okay, next we have Zoo! So, zooming in there. Sorry, that was bad. But Zoo is part of a few cards, or a few collect cards, where they have the unique ability to be able to discard the card for an immediate effect. So no paying CP, no, the standard effects on the field. You can just discard the card out of your hand to use the ability. But obviously put Zoo into the break zone, activate all the backups you control, so that's when it's on the field, or discard Zoo. Choose up to 2 backups you control, activate them. You can only use the ability if Zoo is in your hand. So it's interesting because Zoo directly translates into 2 CP on your backup lineup as well. So maybe you've got something like a Chocolate that has 2 counters on it already. You could discard Zoo to reactivate the Chocolate to then dull her to get you a card to hand. That means Zoo has actually gained you a CP from that, and it is a direct gain as well, because we always talk about how when you play cards, technically if you play a forward, that's also a card out of your hand. So even though you're maybe only paying 4 CP for a 4 CP forward, actually you've paid 6 CP because the forward you've played is worth 2 CP in your hand. And Zoo is interesting because you discard him from hand to gain 2 CP. Pretty cool. So, Hope. When dull character you control becomes active due to your summons or abilities, choose up to 2 characters you control, activate them. So effect will only trigger once per turn, but it means that you can discard Zoo straight from your hand to actually activate 2 backups and 2 other characters, so they could be forwards if you wanted, or you could just reactivate 4 backups with it, which is pretty cool. Obviously, you put Zoo into the break zone when he's on the field, it means you get to activate all your backups, and then hopefully 2 forwards as well. That's also pretty decent. Vanille, Savior of the Laugh. I mean, I love this card, what can I say? You get to put Zoo into the break zone, that will reactivate all your backups, and because a character has been put from the field to the break zone, Ravana will also reactivate as well. You can maybe combo that into something you have with your backups as well, so maybe you've got some of the, I've forgotten what they're called now, but the primal synergizing backups, so minus 2,000 power to something, you can do that a couple of times. There's so many good ways you can go about this, but ultimately, Ravana's a fantastic card, and I love him. Amitelian. I think I said that right. So 2 ice and a colourless dull. Remove the top card of your deck from the game. If the card's cost is 4 CP or less, you may cast it without paying the cost this turn. So you can use it on your opponent's turn as well, which is pretty cool. But ultimately, you can have Zoo there to put into the break zone, and provided you have 3 other backups, including 2 ice and Amitelian, you can just dull those 4. Play onto the field. So Zoo in this effect is actually just getting you a card of 4 CP cast onto the field, because it can be a summon as well. So if you revealed, 4 CP Odin, that would also be cast as well, which is kind of cool. Obviously, you need to be careful of what you do reveal. Maybe you've got a way of finding out what that is through something like Geomancer, but ultimately, you play Zoo onto the field, you put him into the break zone to activate all your backups, you then use Amitelian to then play something onto the field. Pretty cool. Edward, I love this card. So Ice and a colourless and dull. Your opponent discards 1 card from his or her hand. Now what you can do with this is actually you could just discard Zoo to then reactivate the 2 backups. So let's say you've got 4 backups, another Ice and Edward. You just Ice, colourless, Edward, dull. You then get to make your opponent discard a card. You can then discard a Zoo from your hand to then reactivate Edward and the Ice card, and if you've got other active backups, you can then use Edward's ability again to make your opponent discard. So effectively you've paid 6 CP to make your opponent discard 2 cards, but really all you've done is discard Zoo, and you can, whilst you can only use this ability during your turn, that can swing it heavily in your favour, because your opponent may not be expecting the fact that you're making you're gonna make them discard 2 cards even, sorry. Also, this leans heavily into playing something like Barrel Eye as well, so you make your opponent discard a card, you then get to dull and freeze a character they control as well. Fiona, so 2 win, 2 colours, some dull, select 1 character, add it to, search for 1 character, add it to your hand. So, Zoo is able to just put into the break zone, to use Fiona's ability, to then get you that card that you need, and sometimes you just need to be able to find that card, and Fiona's the answer. Ixali, so this is one of the backups I was referring to earlier, where they synergize with the primals of each element, and Ixali is the wind one. So when a wind job primal enters your field, activate Ixali, and then dull and 1 wind, choose 1 forward, activate it. You can only use this ability if you control a wind job primal. But obviously this leans heavily into using something like Bismarck, so you could actually put Zoo into the break, or use Ixali once to then, I don't know, reactivate some more backups. You then put Zoo into the break zone to then use Ixali to reactivate more forwards, to then use Bismarck's ability again, or just attack with something, you know. You can also use this with Ravana as well. Again, it works excellently, so you could maybe attack with Ravana, use Ixali to reactivate Ravana, you attack with Ravana again, you then put Zoo into the break zone, which will in itself reactivate Ravana, he attacks again, and then use Ixali a second time to then attack with Ravana again. Fun times! Cool, Vanille. So, she is a 4 CP 7k Earth forward. When Vanille enters the field, choose 1 dull forward, select 1 number, and reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card is of the same cost as the select number, break it. So basically, she can break something because you know you're going to get that card. Obviously, there'll be times when you play Vanille onto the field and you're not going to know what that top card is, but realistically, you should always have a way to find out. Along the lines of Geomancer, actually, I didn't talk about Vanille's S ability first. So Poison Gurt, which is an S, Earth, and Dull. At the end of the turn, dull all the forwards your opponent controls, which is interesting because it's at the end of the turn ability as well. But yes, Geomancer, look at the top card. Oh look, it's a 4 CP card. Okay, play Vanille. I'll choose that dull forward. I'm going to say 4 card. Oh look, it's a 4 CP card. You get to break it. So effectively with Geomancer on the field, Vanille becomes a 5 CP break a dull forward card. But also you get to look at your top card as well, which whilst it is technically revealed so your opponent will see it, it's good for you to know what's there as well. Hope. So when a dull, sorry, I had to think there. When a dull character, no, sorry, I will get there in the end. When an active character your opponent controls becomes dull due to your summons or abilities, freeze it. So use Vanille with Hope on the field, and at the end of the turn, all your opponent's forwards, if they're active, become dull, they'll then become frozen. So, you know, maybe your opponent goes to their phase 2, and then they want to go to end their turn, sorry, main phase 2. Use Poison Gurt, which then would dull them at the end of the turn. Technically, using Poison Gurt at the end of their main phase 2 pushes them back into main phase 2. So they can still use abilities and whatnot in that turn. But because they're in main phase 2, it means that they cannot attack anymore. So it means that if they don't have a means of making their forwards dull, they are going to become dull through Vanille's ability, which means Hope will also make sure they're frozen as well. Now, obviously, having Vanille and Hope on the field means you're going to have to be in 3 different elements: Earth, Ice, Wind. But 1, you're an Earth, so really being multicolor isn't hard at all. And 2, being in a tricolor deck isn't hard anymore anyway. So, you know, it's fine. Uni. So yes, obviously you play Vanille onto the field. You get to break that dull forward because you know what the top card is going to be through some means. You then cast a summon for whatever, and then Vanille flickers. You get to look at that top card again, provided the summon you've cast doesn't draw your card or whatever, doesn't mess with your deck. And yep, Vanille comes back in. You get to dull and break, or sorry, you get to break another forward that your opponent controls. Barthandelus. Now this is an interesting combo. So at the end of each of your opponent's turns, dull and freeze all the active backups your opponent controls. That combined with Vanille's S ability means that your opponent's got a lot to consider in their turn. So even in their main phase 1 before they go to attack, they can see Barthandelus and Vanille, and if they don't have the answer to them immediately, they have to consider the fact that if you use Vanille's S and they don't use any of their backups, all their forwards are gonna become dull, and all their active backups will become dull and frozen, which is horrible. Not to mention the fact that if you have Hope on the field as well, all their forwards will become dull and frozen, so actually their entire field will become completely locked down. So they've got a lot to think about, and they need to get rid of Barthandelus and Vanille quickly. Setzer. So this is an interesting little combo. Slots, S and Dull. Reveal the top card of your deck. If the revealed card CP cost is an odd number, break all the dull forwards your opponent controls. If the revealed card CP cost is an even number, activate all the characters other than Setzer you control and draw 2 cards. So there's a lot of ways that Setzer's S ability synergizes with Vanille's ability, because obviously you get to reveal the top card, and technically Vanille coming into the deck reveals the top card. You get to look at it, so you can guess you find out what the card is going to be before you use Setzer's S, so you can kind of hedge your bets that way. But also, if you use Vanille's S ability, Poison Gurt, at the end of your opponent's turn, and then you come to your turn, and then you use Setzer's S ability, and you reveal an odd card from the top of your deck, you then get to break all your opponent's forwards that are dull, which should be all of them because of Poison Gurt. Ultimecia. So a similar sort of card to Shiva. Well, I say similar, she's basically better, but not as well. I like Ultimisia, but I've never really played her much, to be honest. But she's still a very, very good card. So choose up to 2 characters your opponent controls, dull them, freeze all the forwards your opponent controls, or freeze all the backups your opponent controls. Obviously, that's only one of the 3, but if you're at 6 points of damage, you get to choose 2 of the 3. So you can use Vanille to dull all the forwards your opponent controls at the end of their turn. And then on your turn, you play Ultimisia to then freeze all the forwards they control as well. I mean, you can still hedge your bets a little bit as well, and freeze all the backups they control as well. If you are on 6 points of damage, so you can kind of swing it in your favour. But ultimately, these two are a horrible combo. Shiva, Lady of the Frost, for the same reason. You use Vanille's S ability, dull the forwards, you play Shiva, and they're frozen. What's also good about this though as well is the fact that Shiva can obviously re-enter herself as well, and depending on how many times you can use Vanille's S ability, you can actually make sure that their forwards, just like I said with Ultimisia and Shiva, you can actually make sure that their field is completely locked down. Okay, Sterne Leonis. Wow, what a card. This card is bonkers strong. 4 CP, 9k Dark Forward. The cost required to cast your forwards is reduced by 1. It cannot become 0. That would have been enough. That would have been enough for this card simply to be a Dark Hero. He's already above curve with a 9k 4 CP and that ability. But also, remove 4 forwards in the break zone from your game. Select one of the 3 following actions. Choose one forward, deal it 7k power, damage even. Choose one monster, break it, or until the end of the turn, all the forwards you control gain 4,000 power and brave. Given the fact that the cost is just to remove 4 forwards from your break zone from the game, mid to late game, that's gonna be easy to fulfill. So this, I mean, you could argue Sterne Leonis is a bit more of a comeback card, but realistically, it's not hard to get that ability off early anyway, and the fact that he consistently reduces the cost of your forwards regardless is just bonkers. This is a great card, yes, but it's also very, very, very power creep in my opinion. Anyway, Arden. So when Arden enters the field, select one of the one of the 2 following actions until the end of the turn. All the forwards you control gain plus 1,000 power and first strike, or choose one forward until the end of the turn. It gains 3,000 power and brave. I mean, if you wanted to give a forward plus 7k power, then you can do that, but I personally think it's better to be able to give all your forwards 4k and brave with Sterne Leonis, and then 1,000 power and first strike with Arden. So all your forwards have plus 5k brave and first strike. That is so strong. Your opponent will struggle to deal with that because unless they have an outright break for multiple forwards to be able to just swoop upon their field and destroy it, 5k is a big power buff. Brave alone is pretty scary as well, but then first strike as well? That means that even if your opponent blocks, the chances are even if you only have a 5k forward ready to attack, that becomes a 10k first strike brave. That's nuts. And you know, you can use Sterne Leonis' ability on your opponent's turn as well. So, you know, you get the brave first strike, you attack through, and then on your opponent's turn, you can still use Sterne Leonis to continue blocking. This is nuts. Manasvin Warmech. So, fire dull, choose one character. If it deals damage to a forward this turn, increase the damage by 2,000 instead. So even if you had to pay 1 fire and a dull to use Sterne Leonis' 7k ability, that's still fine, but now it becomes 9k. You remove 4 forwards from your break zone, you pay a fire and dull Manasvin Warmech to deal 9k to a forward. That's nice and simple. And, you know, again, mid to late game, it's easy to use Sterne Leonis' ability a couple of times, maybe even 3 times, to deal 9k to 3 different forwards. That's just fantastic. Devout. So the reason I've chosen Devout over something like Merlwyb is because as of Opus 14, there is now one of these cards in every element, which allows you to effectively mill yourself and put cards into the break zone. But yeah, when Devout enters the field, reveal the top 2 cards of your deck, add 1 ice card among them to your hand, and put the rest of the cards into the break zone. So you do need to be careful that you aren't milling yourself the dark cards out of your deck, but, you know, realistically, these cards should be used in a mono deck anyway. But yeah, being able to make sure that you're getting cards into your break zone and you can choose for them to be forwards through something like Devout, or I forget what they're called now. Is Malja one? No, Malja's the primal. I can't remember what they're called now. But ultimately, there are easy ways to now get forwards into your break zone in every element, aside from like just plowing them into forwards your opponent controls, to then use Sterne Leonis' ability. I've never been a huge fan of these cards because they mill you, but if it's all a part of the deck, then go for it. March. This is just such a weird combo, but yeah. March has Dull, 1 active forward. Choose one forward blocking March and deal it damage equal to the power of the Dull forward. So you can give March plus 4k power and Brave. You attack with March. If it gets blocked, you can then Dull March to deal it, or deal the forward that's blocking it 11k damage. And what's good is that obviously it's not combat damage between March and that forward, it's literally just March's ability. And it doesn't have to be March that you're dulling either, because all your forwards gain plus 4k in Brave. It means that even if you've got a little 4k forward that attacked with Brave that was an 8k, you can now dull that to deal 8k to something as well. So being able to use Sterne Leonis to just buff your entire field for 4k is just wonderful. Scarmelion. Now this is great because obviously Sterne Leonis reduces the cost of Scarmelion as well. And here's a back attack, so it means that your opponent decides to attack with a huge forward. You pay 1 for Scarmelion to come onto the field. You can then use Sterne Leonis' ability to give Scarmelion plus 4k power. And he's first strike as well, and he can choose to double the damage a forward receives when he enters the field. So your opponent attacks with, I don't know, a 12k forward. You play Scarmelion onto the field for 1 CP. You then give him plus 4k. You then double the damage to that 12k forward. And then Scarmelion blocks for 7, deals 14. That's a back attack right there. And Galore. So, Galore obviously, well, this doesn't have to be necessarily Galore, but forwards or characters that reduce the cost of forwards we played onto the field. Obviously, you need to be careful because both of these cards state that it cannot become 0. So, even if you have another card that does allow cards cost to become 0, Galore or Sterne Leonis will stop it from becoming 0. But yeah, ultimately, with Galore and Sterne Leonis on the field, I mean, you can play Sterne Leonis, or you can have Sterne Leonis on the field to play Galore for 1 CP to then play something like Ariana onto the field. Ariana Grande? Is she in Final Fantasy now? Actually, I think she's in... Wasn't she in Brave Exvius or something? Anyway, yeah, you can pay 2 CP for Aranea to come into the field, who could then also bring another 2 CP onto the field as well. I mean, just being able to reduce all your lightning forwards cost by 2 CP? Crazy. And a lot of, I mean, that would make Illua a 1 CP forward, which is disgusting. And then you can also use Sterne's ability to give all your forwards plus 4k in Brave. So if they've got haste as well, oh, that's just rank. The reason I chose Galore over the likes of Talika, or however you say it, is because Talika, if you dull her and then only play 1 forward, you've effectively just paid that CP anyway, so it doesn't really make a difference. But having Galore on the field, just having static effects on the field that reduce the cost, you're getting your money's worth as soon as you play a forward. There we go, folks. Opus? Episode 52 done and dusted in my new environs. Obviously, we've hit over 250 subscribers now, so yeah. I'm going to be running a competition this week where there will be 3 questions which you have to answer about rulings in the Final Fantasy TCG, and for every question you answer correctly, you will get an entry into the lottery. Now, what I mean is that if you get 2 questions wrong and 1 question right, it means that you get 1 entry. If you get all 3 questions right, you get 3 entries. So you've got 3 chances to win, but obviously the more answers you get correct, the more likely you are to win. Anyway, I'll see you guys there. Be lucky. I'll see you in the next video.